All right, Nick, let's talk about the Las Vegas Raiders. Huge win after the decision to make a coaching change. Interim coach Antonio Pierce steps in. The Raiders, they absolutely dominate, beating the Giants in convincing fashion. But the kicker here is at the end of the game, something unprecedented happened. The practice squad players were on the field, and I think this is something that was very special, and it shows something that's already changing in the Raiders locker room. Let's get on into the article, and we can talk about it on the other side. This, of course, is from SI.com. It says, first, there was a general mood of Las Vegas players in the immediate aftermath of the firing, joking around, playing with a mini basketball in the locker room despite the team's mediocre record to this point. Then, the Raiders actually won, authoritatively. In fact, showing the Giants a 30-6 loss in Nevada on Sunday. On Tuesday, the good times kept rolling from a public relations standpoint. NFL fans lauded out praise toward Las Vegas interim coach Antonio Pierce as a video circulated of him explaining why the Raiders practice squad players were allowed on the sideline during the victory. He said they got a Raiders uniform. Those guys bust their tails, Pierce said when asked about the change. Every man's in there. You're on the team. You're part of the team. And you're in there on game day. The way we practice those 2 days and what we ask them to do, they deserve to be on our sideline. So, Nick, I think this just shows a general better cultural shift for the Raiders in just 1 week. Already, things are changing drastically. There's a lighter mood in the locker room. They won a game in decisive fashion on both sides of the ball. And it shows that this guy, Antonio Pierce, even though the interim coach, he is a player's coach and everybody seems to like him and the media is just eating it up. I think this was a great decision by the Raiders and it's already showing dividends. I'm curious what your thoughts are on this, but Raiders fans, another big game this weekend against the Jets, a tough team. I want to know in the comments below, what do you think the score to the Raiders versus Jets game will be this weekend in the comment section below, Sunday Night Football. But Nick, what do you got on the Raiders and all of these changes so far?
Well, I think the most frustrating thing, if you're a Raiders fans, I think, is that you know that the team was talented and that the problem was the culture. The problem was the coaching and the environment, specifically the head man and Josh McDaniels. Because like you said, they look a completely different team just in terms of demeanor, performance across the board. Antonio Pierce, look, he's obviously a very good motivational guy. I don't think he's going to be a long-term guy. He could potentially become the full-time head coach. We'll have to wait and see. But I think for me, the biggest indicator is that this team does have talent. They do have playmakers on both sides of the ball. They've got veteran guys, they've got young guys, and of course Aiden O'Connell getting his first win as a starter in the NFL. That's not an insignificant thing, so credit to him for getting the job done there. But I think we're going to have to see the rest of the season if the Raiders can keep this up. But I do want to give credit for Antonio Pierce for recognizing the situation and understanding that right now it's all about writing the culture. Because sometimes we see interim coaches and new coaches, they come in and they immediately want to be X's and O's guys, or they want to change up strategies or themes. If you watch the way the Raiders played in terms of schematically, it's almost identical to what Josh McDaniels was running offensively. I think they simplified some things, but other than that, strategically, it's basically the same players. It's basically the same plays. It's all an attitudinal shift, and that's exactly what Antonio Pierce has emphasized and brought to the table. And I think that will be interesting to see if that will carry on the rest of the season. Because if all that was missing was simply just attitude and culture from the Raiders, then obviously all the Raiders have to do going forward is making sure they bring in a coach and GM who is a culture guy. Antonio Pierce could potentially be that guy. There's a lot of other options as well. I think the big question for the Raiders was going to be, do they actually have the talent to compete? Against the Giants, it looked like they did. But I tell you what, right now after one game, there's got to be a little bit of disappointment feeling that the 3-5 start prior to this was based solely on Josh McDaniels. But I will say, future looks a lot brighter now, knowing what you can see what this Raiders team can do when unencumbered by McDaniels. But Miles, what do you think about the potential going forward for this Raiders team? Do you see this as a team that could potentially make a run and make it interesting, or do you think they're just fully focused on 2024 right now?
Well, Nick, already so far behind the gun, and if you look at the Raiders' schedule, it is absolutely brutal being in the AFC West. They have the Jets, the Dolphins, the Chiefs twice still, a Chargers team, Vikings, Colts, Broncos. That is a brutal stretch of games for the Raiders. But I think we can look towards the future, look towards 2024, and see if you could split with the Chiefs. I think you feel pretty dang good about that. Defending Super Bowl champions, probably a team that's going to the AFC Championship game. I think that would be a win. The Dolphins, they've been very inconsistent. If you can play the Dolphins tough, I think that's something you look forward to. I think they got to take it 1 week at a time down this brutal stretch of games and just see if these guys go out there and compete. Because that's what we saw this past weekend versus the Giants. A team that finally went out and competed. They had the motivation. They had the coaching. They had everything necessary. They already had the talent. They just needed the competitive nature, and it was on display this weekend. So I just want to see a Raiders team that goes out and compete. Like you said, Antonio Pierce, looking at the Raiders track record, probably not going to be the guy. Bisaccia wasn't the guy. They just don't stick with the interim coaches. It just doesn't happen that often in the NFL, period. So I think that we have a guy that can come here. If he can keep this team motivated down this brutal stretch, I think that's what the Raiders fans need to hang their hats on.
Well, especially since if you look at Mark Davis's last two hires, Gruden and McDaniels, they were X's and O's offensive guys, and clearly neither of those two hires worked out. If Mark Davis can see Antonio Pierce do a good job and the team play better, which obviously it has so far through one game, hopefully that'll get it through Davis's head that he's like, okay, bring in a culture guy, bring in a guy that's focused on the environment, building in the right ecosystem for the team to be successful. And look, credit to Antonio Pierce for getting it done at this point, because if he keeps doing things like this and the team keeps gravitating toward him, there is a chance Davis surprises people and goes with Antonio Pierce, right? But again, a lot of football left to be played before we go down that route. But no matter what, give credit to Antonio Pierce. So far, strong coaching move. And look, right now, Raiders fans, I think you have the path forward. You can focus on building your culture. You know your team has talent. And now you can see how good Aiden O'Connell is. So obviously, feel good after the win. Big, like you alluded to, Miles, tough road set of games coming up in terms of a brutal schedule. But you know what? Right now, it looks like the future is a lot brighter than it was 7 days ago. And as a Raiders fan, you should probably feel pretty good about that.